How does the brutal rule of a cruel leader, marked by costly and unsuccessful wars against neighboring countries, come to an end? Hello and welcome to UPSC History View. Today, let's learn about Saddam Hussein, the former president of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was born in April 28, 1937 in al-Majid, Iraq, and he died in December 30, 2006, Baghdad. Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq from 1979 to 2003. Let's take a look at his early life. Saddam, the son of peasants, was born in a village near the city of Tikriti in northern Iraq. The area was one of the poorest in the country, and Saddam himself grew up in poverty. His father died before he was born, and he went at an early age to live with an uncle in Baghdad. Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party in 1957. In 1959, he participated in an unsuccessful attempt by Ba'athists to assassinate the Iraqi Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim. Saddam was wounded in the attempt and escaped first to Syria and then to Egypt. Saddam attended Cairo Law School from 1962 to 63 and continued his studies at Baghdad Law College after the Ba'athists took power in Iraq in 1963. The Ba'athists were overthrown that same year, however, and Saddam spent several years in prison in Iraq. Saddam escaped, becoming a leader of the Ba'ath Party, and was instrumental in the coup that brought back the party to power in 1968. Saddam effectively held power in Iraq along with the head of state, President Ahmad Hassan al-Bakr, and in 1972 he directed the nationalization of Iraq's oil industry. Let's learn about the presidency of Saddam Hussein. Saddam began to assert open control of the government in 1979 and became president upon Bakr's resignation. He then became chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council and prime minister, among other positions. He used an extensive secret police establishment to suppress any internal opposition to his rule, and he made himself the object of an extensive personality cult among the Iraqi public. Saddam's goals as president were to supplant Egypt as leader of the Arab world and to achieve hegemony over the Persian Gulf. Saddam launched an invasion of Iran's oil fields in September 1980, but the campaign bogged down in a war of attrition. The cost of the war and the interruption of Iraq's oil exports caused Saddam to scale down his ambitious program for economic development. The Iran-Iraq war dragged on in a stalemate until 1988, when both countries accepted a ceasefire that ended the fighting. Despite the large foreign debt with which Iraq found itself saddled by the war's end, Saddam continued to build up his armed forces. In August 1990, the Iraqi army overran neighboring Kuwait. Saddam apparently intended to use that nation's vast oil revenues to bolster Iraq's economy, but his occupation of Kuwait quickly triggered a worldwide trade embargo against Iraq. He ignored appeals to withdraw his forces from Kuwait. Despite the buildup of a large US-led military force in Saudi Arabia and the passage of United Nations or UN resolutions condemning the occupation and authorizing the use of force to end it, the Persian Gulf War began on Jan 16, 1991 and ended 6 weeks later when the Allied military coalition drove Iraq's armies out of Kuwait. Iraq's crushing defeat triggered internal rebellions by both Shias and Kurds, but Saddam suppressed their uprisings, causing thousands to flee to refugee camps along the country's northern border. Untold thousands more were murdered, many simply disappearing into the regime's prisons. As part of the ceasefire agreement with the UN, Iraq was prohibited from producing or possessing chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. Numerous sanctions were leveled on the country pending compliance, and those caused severe disruption of the economy. Saddam's continued refusal to cooperate with UN arms inspectors led to a 4-day airstrike by the United States and Great Britain in late 1998, which came to be known as Operation Desert Fox. Both countries announced that they would support efforts of the Iraqi opposition to unseat Saddam, whose regime had grown increasingly brutal under UN sanctions. But the Iraqi leader barred UN weapons inspectors from entering his country. In the interim, it became clear that Saddam was grooming one of his sons, Uday or Qusay, to succeed him. Both were elevated to senior positions, and both mirrored the brutality of their father. Moreover, Saddam continued to solidify his control at home, while he struck a profoundly defiant and anti-American stance in his rhetoric. Though increasingly feared at home, Saddam was viewed by many in the Arab world as the only regional leader willing to stand up to what they saw as American aggression. In the wake of the September 11 attacks in the United States in 2001, the US government, asserting that Saddam might provide terrorist groups with chemical or biological weapons, sought to renew the disarmament process. Though Saddam allowed UN weapons inspectors to return to Iraq in November 2002, his failure to cooperate fully with the investigations frustrated the United States and Great Britain and led them to declare an end to diplomacy. On March 17, 2003, US President George W. Bush ordered Saddam to step down from office and leave Iraq within 48 hours or face war. He also indicated that even if Saddam left the country, US forces might be needed to stabilize the new government and search for weapons of mass destruction.
My fellow citizens, events in Iraq have now reached the final days of decision. For more than a decade, the United States and other nations have pursued patient and honorable efforts to disarm the Iraqi regime without war. In recent days, some governments in the Middle East have been doing their part. They have delivered public and private messages urging the dictator to leave Iraq so that disarmament can proceed peacefully. He has thus far refused. All the decades of deceit and cruelty have now reached an end. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately.
When Saddam refused to leave, US and allied forces launched an attack on Iraq on March 20th. The opening salvo of the Iraq War was an assault by US aircraft on a bunker complex in which Saddam was thought to be meeting with subordinates. Although the attack failed to kill the Iraqi leader, subsequent attacks directed against Saddam made it clear that eliminating him was a major goal of the invasion. Always obstinate in his tone, Saddam exhorted Iraqis to lay down their lives to stop US and British forces, but resistance to the invasion soon crumbled, and on April 9th, the day Baghdad fell to US soldiers, Saddam fled into hiding. He took with him the bulk of the national treasury and was initially able to evade capture by US troops. His sons, Uday and Qusay, were cornered and killed in Mosul on July 22nd. But it was not until December 13th that Saddam was finally captured. The once dapper leader was pulled, disheveled and dirty, from a small underground hiding place near a farmhouse in the vicinity of Tikrit. Although he was armed, Saddam surrendered to US soldiers without firing a shot.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, December the 13th, at around 8:30 p.m. Baghdad time, United States military forces captured Saddam Hussein alive. He was found near a farmhouse outside the city of Tikrit in a swift raid conducted without casualties. And now the former dictator of Iraq will face the justice he denied to millions. The capture of this man was crucial to the rise of a free Iraq. It marks the end of the road for him and for all who bullied and killed in his name. For the Ba'athist holdouts largely responsible for the current violence, there will be no return to the corrupt power and privilege they once held. For the vast majority of Iraqi citizens who wish to live as free men and women, this event brings further assurance that the torture chambers and the secret police are gone forever. And this afternoon, I have a message for the Iraqi people. You will not have to fear the rule of Saddam Hussein ever again. All Iraqis who take the side of freedom have taken the winning side. The goals of our coalition are the same as your goals: sovereignty for your country, dignity for your great culture, and for every Iraqi citizen, the opportunity for a better life. In the history of Iraq, a dark and painful era is over. A hopeful day has arrived. All Iraqis can now come together and reject violence and build a new Iraq. The success of yesterday's mission is a tribute to our men and women now serving in Iraq. The operation was based on the superb work of intelligence analysts who found the dictator's footprints in a vast country. The operation was carried out with skill and precision by a brave fighting force. Our servicemen and women and our coalition allies have faced many dangers in the hunt for members of the fallen regime and in their effort to bring hope and freedom to the Iraqi people. Their work continues, and so do the risks. Today, on behalf of the nation, I thank the members of our armed forces, and I congratulate them. I also have a message for all Americans. The capture of Saddam Hussein does not mean the end of violence in Iraq. We still face terrorists who would rather go on killing the innocent than accept the rise of liberty in the heart of the Middle East. Such men are a direct threat to the American people, and they will be defeated. We've come to this moment through patience and resolve and focused action, and that is our strategy moving forward. The war on terror is a different kind of war, waged capture by capture, cell by cell, and victory by victory. Our security is assured by our perseverance and by our sure belief in the success of liberty. And the United States of America will not relent until this war is won. May God bless the people of Iraq, and may God bless America.
Let's learn about the trial and execution of Saddam Hussein. In October 2005, Saddam went on trial before the Iraqi High Tribunal, a panel court established to try officials of the former Iraqi government. Saddam and several confidants were charged with the killing of 148 townspeople in al-Dujail, a mainly Shia town, in 1982. Throughout the 9-month trial, Saddam interrupted the proceedings with angry outbursts, claiming that the tribunal was a sham and that US interests were behind it. The tribunal finally adjourned in July 2006 and handed down its verdicts in November. Saddam was convicted of crimes against humanity, including willful killing, illegal imprisonment, deportation, and torture, and was sentenced to death by hanging. Saddam's half-brother, an intelligence officer, and Iraq's former chief judge were also sentenced to death. Days after an Iraqi court upheld his sentence in December 2006, Saddam was executed by hanging. Thank you very much for listening to this discussion on Saddam Hussein. For more such discussions, get the UPSC Practice app from the App Store.